I thought I should make a video on continuous vibrato. The idea that you can sustain your vibrato through a musical phrase even when you have shifts or difficult fingers, fourth finger, multiple fingers down at once. These are all things that cause people to stop the vibrato, and then what you end up getting is this hot and cold or on and off vibrato effect, which can be very disruptive to a musical phrase. Now, before I talk about anything technical, I will say that many times if I'll ask a student to just sing a phrase, hear it in their mind, in their heart, have a commitment to some shape, and then play it, often that will help the technical aspect tremendously. So you let the music dictate the technique instead of the other way around. But I'm going to give you a couple of ideas, at least with this. One of the things that you first notice is that students will not vibrate on four fingers. It's just real common. Even when we've been working on it and they get it and it's going, I'll have students that are playing along and they'll hit four and it's dead. And so for that situation, I think awareness is 90% of it. So once you can vibrate on four finger, you have to make sure that you actually are. It is definitely more difficult. So you might memorize a passage that has four fingers in it and then stand in front of a mirror and just watch it. Videotaping yourself is a tremendous exercise as well. It's very revealing. So what I will do with a student if they're in a lesson sometimes is I'll take a pencil and I'll write V-I-B over the note. It can be a little distracting. The V kind of looks like an up bow sign. So I'm careful with it, make it small. But sometimes that simple awareness fixes the problem. Okay, so the next thing would be, what if you have multiple fingers down? And that happens sometimes, where even if you like to do independent fingering versus block fingering, which I'm not going to get into here, but sometimes you just have to have more than one finger down. Say you're playing a double stop or something like that. This is something worth practicing on its own. So you might find your easiest finger or your happy finger, and most people it's 2. So put a 2 down and get your vibrato. And then I want you to add another finger, but leave 2 down. Can you do vibrato on both fingers? Now I want you to add your 1. So I went from 2 to 3, and then I added 1. Now I'm doing at this point a very relaxed hand vibrato, or wrist vibrato. So this part is staying still. And I know a lot of people who think that it's easier to vibrate, especially with all 4 fingers down, if you do arm vibrato or this type of vibrato. I will say though, I think arm vibrato is more taxing physically. It can be harder on you if you're doing this all the time. So I think it's worth learning a hand or wrist, depending on what you want to call it, same thing, okay? And then learning how to vibrate even with all 4 fingers down. Now that's not something I can just quickly help you fix, but it is worth spending a couple minutes every day with it. If you can get your second finger to go, there's a good chance you're going to be able to get other fingers to go too. But you remember, if you've watched my vibrato, hand vibrato exercise, I talked about this looseness in the first knuckle, okay? And that has to happen even if all 4 fingers are down. Then you'd be able to play, even if I'm doing arm vibrato, which is what I see in my camera here, so that I can do a little bit of a wiggle on each one of those fingers, okay? The next thing is, say I'm doing a string crossing, okay? I'll play again in second position. My 2 is on the A string. Say I go to B flat with my 4 finger on the D string, right? A lot of students will just stop the 4. And so the string crossing makes it even more challenging. I'm not sure why, but when one hand is doing, let's talk about that for a minute. I've noticed and have been told that when you do something with one hand, it can affect the other hand. So it's hard to separate them. Let's try something here. I want you to do, it's just an off the string stroke, a pendulum stroke here, a slow spiccato. Now I want you to start your vibrato, and I want you to look at it and see if when you reach the top of this pendulum, and the hand never really stops completely, but it does in the swing. Does your hand stop its vibrato? Clearly it doesn't matter so much, but I want you to try and keep it going. So you sustain the left hand through this oscillation. Now let's make it harder. I want you to play a staccato bow, very crisp. We could go even slower. Now add vibrato. When you stop the bow, does your left hand stop? I want you to try keeping it going, okay? So when this hand stops, is this hand moving? Can you do that? It's worth training your hand to do that, okay? The last thing we talk about would be shifting. Say I go first position, I'm on an A string, first finger. Say I go to fifth position, it's an A, third finger. Okay? A lot of my students take a tremendous amount of liberty with this. The hand stops, even if the bow does not. The hand stops so that you have time to prepare and do the shift. And it's really important that you sustain the vibrato as long as possible. And then start it again when you arrive, almost immediately, so that there's not a big gap. Shifts, we try and connect. I've taught shifting. I try not to stop the left hand or the right hand. I release, I shift, the bow's still moving, the finger's still down subtly. That's all a separate technique, and I won't go into that again. But can you keep the vibrato going as long as possible before the shift, and then start it again as soon as possible when you arrive, instantaneously, in fact. This brings up one more point. I notice a lot of students will start a note, any note, and then they'll start their vibrato, so they sneak in with the vibrato on. And I think well, that's a cool effect. It's certainly not the way you want to start every note, right? So the left hand needs to be instantaneous. Now I've known some teachers that will start the left hand first and then add the bow. You know, I'm not a huge fan of that. I think partly I like the two to go together, and I always worry about shaking the instrument a little bit so that the bow makes a little bounce when I start the note. So I just try and start both at the same time, so that you're not doing that effect, okay? So there's some ideas on continuous vibrato. It is definitely challenging, and part of it, as I say again, is just awareness. If you're aware that it's happening, maybe you can fix it. So good luck with this technique.